So I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? You grab your coffee, you're scrolling through the news on your phone, and you read that the largest, most entrenched military and economic empire on the face of the earth has just evaporated,
Just completely gone.
completely dismantled, and not over, a 30-year Cold War, not through decades of these gradual, painful treaties. We're talking gone in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, 12 days to be exact,
Yeah,
which is just nuts to even conceptualize.
12 days. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. It is July 10th, 2026, and I really want you to ground yourself in the reality of today just for a moment because we are about to pull you completely out of it.
Oh, absolutely. The source material today is wild.
It really is. Today's source is this absolutely massive, wildly fascinating alternate history document titled simply Alternate Universe.txt. And the premise here is, well, it's going to bend your mind a bit.
It's definitely not your standard historical fiction, that's for sure.
Right. So we are trapping the life of a 21st century polymath, a guy born in 1999 into this incredibly wealthy, politically connected family in Patna, India.
And he's not just rich, he's a genius.
Yeah, he's an aerospace engineer. He has degrees in psychology and finance. He totally understands the modern stock market. He's a trained marksman. He speaks like 6 languages.
A real Renaissance man of the modern era.
Exactly. And in January of 2026, so like this current year, he dies in a car crash.
And that right there is exactly where this timeline fractures.
Right.
Because his consciousness doesn't just end, it transfers. He reincarnates.
Which is such a crazy hook.
It is. He was reborn in the year 1890, but he retains every single scrap of his 21st century knowledge, and he's born into another staggeringly wealthy, highly connected aristocratic family in Patna, the Yadav dynasty.
So, okay, you have a modern systems engineer, a financial whiz, and essentially a student of modern warfare trapped in the body of an 1890s aristocratic heir, and he's living under the absolute height of the British Raj. Which is just, the ultimate asymmetric advantage, right?
Totally. Now, the document we are looking at outlines this incredibly dense restructuring of the entire subcontinent. Like it goes into new ministries, agricultural policies, economic overhauls.
Yeah, the administrative stuff in this text is incredibly dense.
It is. But our mission for this deep dive is very specific. We are going to bypass all that administrative paperwork.
Thank goodness, or we would be sitting here analyzing, like, fictional crop yields for the next 6 hours.
Right. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
So our focus today is squarely on the sheer tactical execution of the July 1916 revolution. We're going to explore the meticulous 6-year shadow war he orchestrates.
Buildup is incredible.
And then we're going to give you this cinematic hour-by-hour breakdown of how the British Raj actually collapsed under a modernized assault.
And we can't ignore the casualties either. No, we can't. We'll get into the staggering, frankly apocalyptic casualties that came with it, and the immediate geopolitical shockwaves that hit a world that was, already tearing itself apart in World War I. I am so ready for the scale of this.
Yeah, and we are going to ground that cinematic scale in a really rigorous analysis of the mechanics.
Like how he actually pulled it off.
Exactly. Because an empire holding millions of people doesn't just fall in 12 days by accident. It requires a level of asymmetric, futuristic planning that the colonial powers simply did not have the conceptual framework to even recognize, let alone stop.
So let's start with the foundation, the mastermind himself, and this shadow war he builds between 1910 and 1916.
Right, because he doesn't just wake up and start a war. He has to lay the groundwork.
Look at the protagonist's background in this new timeline. Born in 1890, his new family, the Yadavs, are not just rich. They are like nation-state level rich.
Oh yeah, staggeringly wealthy.
They are connected to the Indian National Congress, the royal Scindia family, and they have loyalists embedded in the high ranks of the British government. But crucially, and this is a big deal, they own the first indigenous Indian bank, with branches stretching from Madras all the way to London.
And they have tea plantations, shipping lines, steel plants, and a newspaper syndicate. It's an empire within an empire.
Which is insane for an indigenous family at that time.
What's fascinating here is how that financial infrastructure is the perfect incubator. An indigenous bank is essentially a financial black box for him.
Wait, what do you mean by a black box in this context?
Well, it means he controls the ledger. The British colonial authorities cannot easily track his transactions, his loans, or, frankly, his money laundering.
Oh, right, because it's all internal.
Exactly. He has the capital, he has the cover of extreme aristocratic wealth, and he has a global logistical network that he owns outright.
Okay, so he goes to Oxford in 1905, Balliol College. And by 1906, He's expanding his family's newspaper empire into Manchester, Paris, Berlin, and New York.
Setting up those global communication networks early.
Yeah, but wait, I want to talk about how he builds his personal credibility first. Because he doesn't just use his money. He uses his 21st century brain to make himself basically untouchable in the early 20th century.
Oh, the physics paper. This part is brilliant.
It really is. In 1908, he publishes a paper on the quantum mechanical model of the atom.
But he holds back. That's the key.
Right. He's from 2026. He knows quantum physics inside and out. But he deliberately limits his 1908 paper to the maximum experimental verification methodology that was available in the world at that specific time.
Which shows incredible discipline.
He hints at wave-particle duality, but intentionally stops short of deeper wave mechanics. Because, I mean, if he drops 1980s quantum theory on a 1908 scientific community, they won't give him a Nobel Prize.
No, they'd throw him in an asylum. They'd think he was crazy.
Exactly. So he calibrates his genius perfectly for the era he's trapped in.
It is an absolute masterclass in restraint. He provides just enough revolutionary insight to be verified by contemporary science.
And it works.
Oh, perfectly. In 1909, Ernest Rutherford's gold foil experiment further validates his paper. And in 1910, our protagonist is awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics.
Which is just a massive flex.
It is. So he returns to India not just as a wealthy heir, but as an absolute global icon, an intellectual giant.
He gets an arranged marriage to a princess of Vadodara, cementing his ties to the princely states. And with his cover absolutely unassailable, the Shadow War actually begins.
Right. From 1910 to 1913, he basically goes off the grid, conceptually speaking.
He goes to work building a secret army. He uses that untraceable indigenous bank wealth to literally bribe British generals to turn a blind eye to the Northeast.
Yep, just buying them off.
He builds this massive hidden network across Assam, Manipur, Tripura, and Balochistan. My question for you is, why there? Like, why the Northeast?
Well, geography is destiny in guerrilla warfare. Assam and Manipur offer incredibly dense jungle terrain.
Right, it's super thick out there.
Highly remote, and far from the administrative centers of Calcutta and Delhi. By buying off the regional commanders, he creates a geographic blind spot.
Ah, I see.
It's the perfect terrain to build massive camouflage training camps without the risk of a random British cavalry patrol just stumbling upon them.
And what he is building in those jungles is terrifying if you are a colonial power. Like, he doesn't just hand a bunch of recruits bolt-action rifles and tell them to march in a straight line.
No, that would be 19th century thinking.
He introduces 21st century training psychology to build modernized forces. He creates specialized gunmen infantry and specialized assassins.
The training psychology is the real weapon here, I think. He isn't training a traditional colonial militia.
What's the difference, really?
Well, he is training a 21st century special operations force in the 1910s. Modern training psychology emphasizes stress inoculation.
Which means what, exactly?
It's getting soldiers used to the physiological panic of combat so they don't freeze up when the shooting starts. It also emphasizes decentralized command.
Okay, so like, if the boss goes down, the squad doesn't panic.
Exactly. If the commanding officer is killed, every single soldier knows the mission and can take charge.
That's a huge shift.
It's massive. The British Indian Army at the time was highly rigid. They relied on massed formations, volley fire, and strict top-down colonial hierarchy.
Basically waiting for a guy with a fancy mustache to say fire.
Exactly. The British soldiers were trained to wait for an officer to tell them to shoot. He is building an army that can think on its feet, maneuver in small squads, and exploit the slow reaction times of their enemy.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more, because I'm stuck on the logistics here. The text says he has armored automobile infantry.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
We are talking about vehicles with 60-degree V12 engines, 4x4 drive with locking differentials, covered in 8mm face-hardened nickel steel armor.
Yeah, real heavy-duty stuff.
How on earth do you manufacture and hide a fleet of armored cars in 1912? It's like a grandmaster playing a chess game in 4D while the British think they're playing a localized game of checkers.
You hide it right within the legitimate supply chains of his family's empire.
Oh, because of the steel plants.
Right. Remember, they own massive steel plants and global shipping lines. He can import raw 8mm nickel steel plating under the guise of commercial shipbuilding.
That is so sneaky.
And he can import heavy-duty engine parts from the United States, logging them as agricultural tractor components or mining equipment for the princely states.
Oh, wow. So they just look like tractor parts on the manifest.
Exactly. They are shipped in pieces to these remote jungle warehouses in Assam and assembled out of sight. The logistics are perfectly compartmentalized.
So no single person knows what they're actually building.
Precisely. The guy buying the tires doesn't know about the steel. The guy buying the steel doesn't know about the engines. Only the protagonist sees the final vehicle.
It's a completely industrialized insurgency, and his recruitment is just as targeted. He recruits Lascars.
Yes, the Lascars are crucial to this.
For those of you who might not know, Lascars were Indian sailors who essentially ran the engine rooms and maintained the ships of the British Merchant Navy.
And that is just a brilliant tactical move.
Why is that?
By recruiting the Lascars, he is infiltrating the circulatory system of the British Empire's maritime trade.
Oh, wow.
He suddenly has loyal agents on almost every major shipping route, capable of smuggling intelligence, weapons, or key personnel across the globe without ever triggering colonial suspicion.
Because they're just seen as the invisible workforce pulling the levers.
Exactly. They were entirely overlooked by the British command structure.
He's also building a massive coalition with the princely states. These were the semi-autonomous kingdoms, Baroda, Gwalior, Mysore, Indore, that the British allowed to exist as, like, buffer zones, right?
Right, provided they swore loyalty to the crown.
But he is quietly turning them. He's recruiting Indian civil service agents, infiltrating police stations.
Getting his people everywhere.
He travels across the Raj, Lucknow, Quetta, Lahore, Colombo, Rangoon, just knitting this massive invisible web together. He even travels to the USA, Japan, and Germany, setting up discreet trading posts.
He is laying down the wiring for a new nation while the old one is still living in the house.
That's a great way to put it.
And then he gets the greatest strategic gift possible. 1914.
The outbreak of the First World War.
The British Empire goes to full mobilization.
And the text notes that when the British pull their forces to go fight in Europe, the protagonist completely manipulates the system. He ensures that almost all of his loyal, infiltrated officers and administrators remain stationed in the subcontinent.
What's fascinating here is how he essentially weaponizes the British Empire's own global crisis against them.
Right, because Britain is distracted.
More than distracted. Britain is desperately pulling its most experienced troops, its heavy artillery, and its best commanders out of India to feed the absolute meat grinder of the Western Front.
Leaving a huge power vacuum behind.
Exactly. The protagonist uses his wealth, his bureaucratic influence, and his infiltrated civil service agents to ensure that the personnel filling the gaps left behind are his people.
That is so smart.
By securing the railways, the ports, the telegraph offices, and the regional administrative roles, he constructs a shadow government right under the nose of the British viceroy.
All of this meticulous, obsessive planning over 6 years, it was just a coiled spring getting tighter and tighter and tighter.
And the British had no idea.
None at all. And on July 1st, 1916, that spring finally snapped. Which brings us to the 0 hour, the night the empire fell.
July 1st to July 10, 1916, a 9-hour window that completely rewrote global history.
Let's walk you through the mechanics of this night because it's cinematic. Imagine the tension. It is 8 p.m. on July 1st. It's the height of the monsoon season.
So it's pouring rain, visibility is 0.
Pre-positioned forces, activated by secret letters and decentralized orders, strike simultaneously across the entire subcontinent, and the logistical targeting is just surgical.
Completely surgical.
The Howrah railways in Bengal are captured immediately.
Right.
Break down why Howrah is the first domino here.
Well, Howrah Station is the central nervous system of Eastern Transit.
Okay.
It is the primary railway terminus serving Calcutta, which was the commercial beating heart and the former administrative capital of the British Raj.
So it's a huge choke point.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to conquer a 1916 landmass, you don't start by shooting soldiers in a field. You start by capturing the switches.
The railway switches.
Right. By taking Howrah, they instantly sever the British ability to move troop reinforcements, transport munitions, or send hardline communications out of the Eastern Theater. You paralyze their logistics in a matter of minutes.
It's the 1916 equivalent of a massive DDoS attack. You don't just defeat the British Army, you turn off their network.
That's a perfect analogy.
You derail trains at the junctions to physically block the tracks, you take the switchboards, and suddenly they can't move and they can't talk. Calcutta falls. Bombay, the financial gateway on the western coast, falls.
Assam falls. Madras rebels in the south. Karachi falls. Colombo in Lanka falls.
The commercial and transit hubs are choked out simultaneously.
And while the limbs of the empire are being severed, he launches a decapitation strike against the head.
Shimla, the summer capital of the British Raj, nestled high up in the Himalayan foothills. Lord Chelmsford, the Viceroy of India, is taken prisoner before he even knows there's a war on.
Capturing Shimla is a logistical masterpiece in itself.
How so?
Well, Shimla is isolated. It's accessed primarily by a narrow-gauge mountain railway. It's not easy to get to.
So they just cut it off?
Exactly. By blowing the tracks behind them and seizing the telegraph offices on the mountain, the revolutionaries completely isolate the highest level of British command. Lord Chelmsford is effectively trapped in the clouds.
Think about the tactical brilliance of this specific 9-hour window. By taking out communications in Shimla, transit at Hara, and commerce at Bombay and Calcutta at the exact same moment, the British command structure was instantly blinded and deafened.
There was literally no one left to give orders.
And no telegraph wires intact to transmit them, even if there was.
And we haven't even touched on the internal political collapse yet.
Oh, the princely states.
Right, because simultaneously the princely states activate. Baroda, Gwalior, Marwar, Tripura, Manipur, all rebel at the exact same time, unleashing their own state forces against British garrisons.
And then there's Hyderabad. The text specifically notes that Hyderabad falls because the Nizam is captured by an organized betrayal. What does that tell us about the methods here?
Well, the Nizam of Hyderabad was arguably one of the wealthiest men in the world at that time, and historically a staunch ally of the British crown.
Right, a real heavyweight.
His state was massive, right in the center of the Deccan Plateau. If he had mobilized his personal armies against the revolution, it would have bogged the protagonist down in a drawn-out, bloody civil war.
It would have ruined the 12-day timeline.
Completely. So an organized betrayal means the protagonist didn't waste lives assaulting Hyderabad's fortresses. He cultivated inside agents.
He just bought his people.
Yes. He bought off the Nizam's own courtiers, his bodyguards, his generals. He neutralized the threat from within the palace walls before a single shot had to be fired outside.
Think about how you'd feel as a British officer on the ground. You go to sleep on the night of July 1st. You are a colonial administrator. You think you're managing the crown jewel of the largest empire on the planet.
You feel completely secure.
And you wake up at 5 a.m. on July 2nd to find the telegraph lines are dead, the trains aren't running, your viceroy is a hostage in the mountains, and there are armored V-12 automobiles executing 21st century close-quarters combat tactics in your streets.
It's unfathomable.
You literally woke up as a prisoner of war.
It is a systemic shock.
Yeah.
The colonial forces were fundamentally incapable of processing what was happening.
Because they'd never seen anything like it.
Right. They were trained for local riot control, frontier skirmishes, and static trench warfare in Europe. They were completely unprepared for a perfectly synchronized, multi-theater, combined arms continental war that just, manifested out of thin air.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The protagonist doesn't just let the chaos run. He doesn't stay hidden in his jungle camps and let a proxy take the heat.
No, he steps right out.
At 8 a.m. on July 2, 1916, exactly 12 hours after the first strike, he steps into the light. He takes full public responsibility for the revolution. He proclaims independence. And he raises the tricolor flag featuring the Ashoka Chakra.
The Ashoka Chakra, the Wheel of Law, is a deeply resonant historical symbol tying back to the ancient Mauryan emperor Ashoka.
So it's a very calculated choice of branding.
Definitely. By choosing that symbol, he is bypassing the immediate religious divides of the 1910s and appealing to an ancient, unified civilizational identity. But more importantly, the timing of that public declaration is vital.
Right. Why not stay hidden until the dust settles? Why put a target on your back so early?
Because if you decapitate a massive state and leave a power vacuum, the revolution will instantly fracture into 100 localized warlord conflicts.
Oh, everyone would just scramble for power.
Exactly. By stepping forward at 8 a.m., providing a face, a flag, and a stated goal, he gives the mobilized masses a central authority to rally behind. He instantly legitimizes the new state in the eyes of the populace and prevents his own coalition from turning on itself.
But decapitating the leadership in Shimla didn't instantly vaporize the British army on the ground. It just blinded them.
Right, they were still heavily armed.
And a blinded, terrified colonial army, it doesn't just surrender, it lashes out. Which takes us into the period desperation and final collapse, running from July 3 to July 12.
The 9-hour decapitation was flawless. It was basically art. But the cleanup, the actual physical eradication of entrenched colonial military power from their garrisons and fortresses, was a grinding, brutal reality.
On July 3, the cities of Pune and Gwadar fall to the revolutionaries. But this is where the source text shows the British taking extreme, desperate measures. The document explicitly notes that on July 3, British forces shelled the Babri Masjid in Faizabad. And I want to be very clear here for you listening. Looking at the source text, we are analyzing this strictly through the lens of military tactics and historical events as they are laid out in this alternate timeline.
Absolutely. We have to look at this objectively. From a purely military and strategic perspective, when a conventional military force begins using heavy artillery on major cultural and religious heritage monuments, it indicates a complete breakdown of their conventional military strategy.
Right.
They aren't aiming at strategic targets like railways or munitions depots anymore.
They're just trying to break the psychology of the people.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it signifies the transition of the British from a colonial police force attempting to maintain order into a desperate, trapped, occupying army.
They realize they've lost control.
Yes. They are resorting to acts of terror. They are likely trying to incite sheer chaos, hoping that sectarian outrage or widespread panic might disrupt the protagonists' incredibly unified military coalition. It's the thrashing of a dying leviathan.
But it doesn't work. The momentum of the 21st century tactics is just too strong. Over the next 3 days, July 4 through July 6, the cities of Allahabad, Faizabad, and Lucknow fall.
The noose is just tightening.
And on July 5th, the British forces shell the Shahi Eidgah Mosque in Mathura right before Mathura itself is overrun by the revolutionaries on the 6th. Again, it's that scorched earth desperation as their garrisons are squeezed.
Because the mechanics of urban warfare in 1916 are horrific. You have armored cars pushing through narrow, winding city streets.
It's not an open battlefield.
No, it's brutal. You have revolutionaries using modern fire and maneuver tactics against British loyalists who are barricaded in stone administrative buildings. It's a slow, methodical, block-by-block clearance.
And it's not just the British feeling the heat. During this exact same window, July 5th to July 10th, the Portuguese and French colonial enclaves are aggressively swept off the map.
Which is a really interesting strategic choice.
Yeah, Goa and Puducherry fall on the 5th. Dadra, Nagar Haveli, and Daman fall on the 7th. Diu falls on the 10th. Why spend resources attacking the French and the Portuguese when you are in a death match with the British Empire? Weren't they just sort of swept up in the momentum, or were they specifically targeted?
They were absolutely targeted.
Yeah.
Because you cannot declare a sovereign, unified subcontinent if you leave European colonial footholds intact on your coastlines.
Oh, because of the Royal Navy.
Exactly. The protagonist is thinking 2 steps ahead. He knows that if he leaves the Portuguese port of Goa or the French port of Puducherry alone, the British Royal Navy could potentially use those neutral or allied European ports as safe havens and staging grounds for a massive counterinvasion.
Wow, so he just kicks everyone out?
He has to sweep the board entirely. He has to close every single door on the coastline.
So by July 10th, the coasts are completely secure, the central railway hubs are gone, the viceroy is captured, and on July 11th, we hit the true structural breaking point.
The mutiny.
The Indian Punjab Battalion's forces that were still nominally under British command, fighting for the Raj Mutiny, they turn on their own commanding officer, British General Charles Monro, hand him over to the revolutionaries as a prisoner, and the entire Punjab region falls.
We really need to underline how massive that is for the British psyche.
Why the Punjab specifically?
The Punjab was the absolute core of the British Indian Army's recruitment strategy. It was based on their colonial martial races theory. They heavily relied on Punjabi soldiers to police the rest of the empire.
Ah, so when they turn.
When those specific battalions mutinied and handed over General Monro, it was the psychological death blow. It signaled to any remaining loyalist forces scattered across the continent that the war was unequivocally over.
It's just done.
The colonial military apparatus hadn't just been defeated, it had digested itself.
And so, on July 11 and 12, the new reality is formalized. The United Kingdom of Great Bharat, the UKGB, is proclaimed as a constitutional monarchy.
It's officially a new nation.
The protagonist is declared the Samrat, the emperor. A constitution committee is instantly formed, and the final stubborn holdouts, the major princely states that were sitting on the fence, waiting to see who would win the war places like Jammu and Kashmir, Bhopal and Junagadh, finally look at the map and submit to the new empire.
The consolidation is complete. In 12 days, the political geography of the planet has been fundamentally redrawn.
Now, a 12-day war might sound fast. It sounds incredibly efficient.
It does, but
But fast does not mean bloodless, and when you actually look at the data provided in the text, the sheer human cost of this sudden regime change is staggering.
this is where the grim reality of 21st century lethality meets the dense, unyielding infrastructure of the early 20th century subcontinent.
I want you to read the numbers from the text for us. Give us the butcher's bill, covering just July 1st to July 12th. Let this sink in for a second.
Okay, on the side of the Raj and the colonial forces, 15,807 British soldiers dead, 45,000 Indian loyalists dead, 21,500 princely state loyalists dead, 9,000 from the Burma division dead, 800 French casualties, and 1,070 Portuguese casualties. The British also lost 2 naval cruisers.
That is just staggering. Just on the colonial side, you were looking at nearly 93,000 dead in under 2 weeks.
It's a bloodbath.
But the revolutionaries paid a massive price too, right? It wasn't one-sided?
No, not at all. 51,700 revolutionary soldiers dead, 14,760 Allied princely state troops dead, 3,000 of the protagonists' elite, highly trained paramilitaries dead, and interestingly, 790 British defectors were killed fighting for the revolution.
Wait, British defectors, almost 800 of them died fighting against their own empire.
It shows the sheer psychological shock and awe of the uprising. The protagonist's propaganda, combined with the obvious inevitability of his victory, convinced hundreds of British personnel to switch sides immediately and fight for the new regime.
That is wild.
But the violence also spilled into regional conflicts tied into this window. 4,000 Ran and Nepali army soldiers dead against 9,230 Nepali revolutionaries, 15,000 Burma revolutionaries dead, and 180 princely state rulers and their family members were executed or killed in localized uprisings.
So what does this all mean? If you aggregate all of those numbers, you are looking at well over 180,000 human beings killed in 12 days. That is an apocalyptic casualty rate.
It's hard to even process that level of violence in such a short window.
To put that in perspective, that is roughly 15,000 deaths per single day of combat. I have to push back on the strategy here.
Okay, go ahead.
If you are a polymath from the year 2026 and you bring back modern psychology, modern logistics, V12 armored cars, and you have 6 full years to plan this perfectly in the shadows, why are your own casualties so astronomically high?
That's a fair question.
Over 70,000 dead on the revolutionary side. If he's a genius, shouldn't it have been cleaner?
It feels like it should be cleaner, but I want you to think of this like the controlled demolition of a massive skyscraper.
Oh.
Even if you plan the explosive charges perfectly, even if your math is flawless, the building is so massive that the thousands of tons of falling debris are going to crush everything nearby.
Well,
You can bring 21st century tactics, but you are still executing them with 1916 technology and 1916 medical care once the plan hits first contact with the enemy.
right. If a soldier gets shot in 1916, there are no modern antibiotics. It doesn't matter if his commander is from 2026.
Exactly. And look closely at the casualty rate of the Indian loyalists. 45,000 dead. That shows how deeply and brutally divided the pre-existing military structure was.
They were fighting their own people.
This wasn't just a clean war of liberation. It was simultaneously a massive, localized civil war occurring street by street, barracks by barracks. When you have simultaneous mutinies in densely populated urban centers, Calcutta, Bombay, Delhi, Lucknow, you're looking at brutal, close-quarters urban warfare.
So there's just no way to avoid the collateral damage.
There is no modern surgical strike precision here. It is a meat grinder. The protagonist likely calculated this. He accepted that this staggering loss of life was the required blood price to compress what would have been a 30-year, agonizing war of independence into 12 definitive days.
It is chilling to think about the sheer density of the violence. 15,000 people a day. But the blood was barely dry on the streets when the international community realized they had to respond.
The map of the world had changed overnight, and the global powers had to react immediately.
And remember the global context here. It is mid-July 1916. The world is in the absolute depths of the First World War.
The timing is everything.
Exactly. And on July 13th, literally the day after the new empire is formally proclaimed, they receive immediate diplomatic recognition by the Central Powers. Germany, the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria all instantly recognize the United Kingdom of Great Bharat as a legitimate sovereign nation.
This raises an important question, though. The speed of that diplomatic recognition is incredible. Why did the Central Powers move so incredibly fast to legitimize a rebel government?
Because it's brilliant geopolitical judo, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Precisely. The UKGB just performed the greatest strategic favor the Central Powers could possibly imagine.
Because Britain needed India for the war effort in Europe.
Exactly. Britain relied heavily on India for immense wealth, for raw materials like cotton, jute, and tea, and critically, for manpower. Millions of Indian soldiers and laborers supported the British war effort.
Wow.
By severing India from the British Empire in a matter of days, the protagonist has effectively neutralized Britain's primary economic engine, while Britain is locked in a total war of attrition in Europe.
The protagonist masterfully used the global conflict as a diplomatic shield. He knew Britain couldn't spare the naval armada or the ground forces required to reconquer India because they were bogged down in the muddy trenches of Europe.
They just didn't have the ships or the men to send back.
And he knew Germany would instantly legitimize his new empire simply to spite the British and solidify their loss.
And once the Central Powers validate them, the regional dominoes start falling fast. The surrounding nations see the writing on the wall.
Between July 14 and 16, the oppressive Rana regime in neighboring Nepal is overthrown. The prime minister, Chandra Shumsher, is beheaded. Nepal instantly recognizes the UKGB. Siam recognizes them.
It's a cascade effect.
Burma declares independence from the British and signs mutual recognition with Bharat. Afghanistan voids its colonial-era treaties with the British and recognizes the Durand Line as an international border with the UKGB. Even the Maldives surrenders and becomes a protectorate.
It's a complete, dizzying realignment of South and Southeast Asian geopolitics. The British hegemony, which took centuries to build, is replaced in a matter of hours by a cooperative, UKGB-led regional bloc.
What stands out to you? Think about how you'd process this if you were living through it. Imagine being a citizen in London or Washington or Paris reading the morning paper on July 14, 1916. The sheer geopolitical whiplash.
It would feel like fiction.
You thought you were reading about the slow, grinding war in Europe, and suddenly you find out that half the British Empire just evaporated, and there's a new emperor in Delhi, backed by the Germans. It would feel like the world was ending.
And for the British colonial system, it absolutely was ending. The psychological blow alone would have devastated London. But for the protagonist, the destruction was just the prerequisite. Now he had to build.
Right. On July 17, just 5 days after the war ends, the protagonist stands at the Red Fort in Delhi and announces the interim framework of government. He doesn't take a breath.
He hits the ground running.
He completely restructures the massive subcontinent into 26 distinct states and 19 union territories. He establishes a new parliament with a Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, a Supreme Court, and officially reorganizes the armed forces into the Indian National Army, Navy, Air Force, and Special Forces.
He is installing a modern federated constitutional monarchy over the smoking ashes of a colonial bureaucracy. He is applying his 21st century MBA and systems engineering background directly to statecraft.
Because he knows what's coming, right?
Yes, he knows he has to build an administration that can withstand the eventual, inevitable pushback from the West once WW1 ends.
And he doesn't shy away from the deepest, most entrenched societal issues either. Just a month later, on August 20, the Samrat constitutionally abolishes the caste system.
Which is huge.
The text says he makes it a crime equivalent to treason against the state to use caste as a criterion for any legal, social, or economic distinction.
Which is a staggering, monumental social reform to push through by decree in 1916.
It really is.
It shows that he understands that modernizing the military and the economy is useless if the social fabric remains anchored in oppressive, feudal hierarchies.
Yeah, you can't have a modern superpower with that kind of internal division.
Exactly. By linking caste discrimination directly to treason, he is using the absolute, unquestioned wartime authority of his new crown to forcefully drag the society into a more egalitarian, unified future.
He needs every single citizen working together.
It is a harsh autocratic method, but it is vital for the massive continent-wide industrial mobilization he plans next. You cannot build a 21st century superpower if a significant portion of your population is subjugated by ancient social codes.
The revolution was won, the British were gone, the framework was set. But as the rest of this massive document shows, actually governing this new, highly modernized, independent Bharat and building its industries from scratch to compete on the global stage was an entirely different beast.
The 12 days of violence were really just the prologue to the real work. The destruction was the easy part. The construction is what will define his new empire.
What a staggering, mind-bending historical scenario. A polymath from 2026 reincarnates into 1890, uses a century of future knowledge in aerospace, psychology, and logistics, and executes a 12-day military masterstroke.
It's incredible.
He weaponizes World War I, orchestrates a 9-hour decapitation of the British command using essentially a localized infrastructure blackout, absorbs hundreds of thousands of casualties in a brutal urban shadow war, and births a highly modernized, independent United Kingdom of great fraught.
It is the ultimate thought experiment in asymmetric warfare and applied historical knowledge. It shows how fragile power structures truly are when faced with a paradigm shift they just cannot comprehend.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, something that isn't explicitly resolved in the text but hangs over everything we've discussed.
Okay, lay it on me.
This 12-day revolution happened in July 1916. For those of you who know your history, July 1st, 1916 is the exact day the historical Battle of the Somme began in Europe.
Oh, wow. The bloodiest, most devastating battle in British military history.
Exactly. So imagine this timeline. Right as the British Army is taking catastrophic, unprecedented losses in the mud of the Somme, right as they need every bullet and every penny they can get.
The news.
Right. They receive a telegraph that India, their primary economic engine, their largest reserve of manpower, the jewel of their empire, is just gone overnight. Poof. So the question is, without India, does the British Empire collapse entirely under the weight of WW1?
That is a fascinating what if.
Does Germany actually win the First World War in this alternate timeline because Britain simply goes bankrupt and starves?
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if a single mind incubating ideas from 2026 can architect the downfall of a global empire in 1916. What are the ideas, the technologies, the philosophies that we are incubating right now today in 2026 that might fundamentally rewrite the future?
It's a humbling reminder that history is never a straight line. It only takes the right pressure, applied by the right mind at the exact right point, for everything we know to shatter and reform.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the timelines you take for granted. Keep looking for those unseen pressure points, and we'll catch you on the next one.